Let's talk about the new song Letter to America, Mike, because this has just been an incredible story. The fact that not only is it so potent in the message that you've just given the world with this song, but the endorsement, the authorization process that you had to go through with Bob Dylan's people to actually get the approval for that. Tell me how that came about.
Well, it was one of those stories that just blew me away when it occurred, Paul. I'd written the lyrics some time ago, and I struggled to find a way to deliver it musically. And when I got to the end of writing the lyrics, I realized that, I'd borrowed a line from a Bob Dylan song from the late 90s, which is one of my very favorite Dylan songs called Not Dark Yet. And the last two lines of my song are not dark yet, but it's getting there. And they're the last two lines of the chorus, or the verses, in fact, in Bob's song. And I thought, oh, I probably can't do that. But anyway, I'll check and see if the publishers here in Australia who look after Bob's catalogue could find a way that I could get permission. So I sent them a note. They sent me back about 3 pages of forms to fill in and said, well, this will probably take a month to 6 weeks to get a response, but it's probably highly unlikely you'll get permission. And I thought, oh, okay, well, I'll change the line ever so slightly and not quote Bob directly. And then I realized that my old friend Danny O'Keefe, the wonderful, wonderful American songwriter who wrote such songs as Good Time Charlie's Got the Blues and The Road, which Jackson Browne, of course, recorded, was one of those very, very few writers who has a co-write with Bob Dylan. And I thought, oh, hang on, I'll send Danny a note. So I sent him an email and said, mate, here's the lyrics to this new song. Do you know anybody in Bob's management or his publishing company over there that I could approach and seek permission to quote him? Thinking, oh, it'll be a long shot, but hey, worth a try. So Danny sends me back an email that's saying, here's Jeff Rosen's email address. Jeff is Bob's manager. He's a really good guy, but it's highly unlikely you'll get permission, so I'd advise you to rewrite the last 2 lines. And I thought, oh, okay, I'll give it a shot. So at about 8:30 one morning, I sat down and I sent Jeff Rosen a note with a copy of the lyrics saying, I'm asking permission, but I well understand that if you're not happy for me to do so, I'll change the line. I get a reply back inside less than an hour saying, hey, Mike, happy you can use Bob's lyrics. And I thought, how amazing is that? I mean, he's been one of my songwriting heroes all my life, as indeed he has been for an enormous number of people. And to actually have him grant permission that quickly was astonishing. So I proceeded to then work on the music and get it right, and recorded it remotely over the course of the last 5 or 6 weeks.
Wow. So I assume Jeff then had that discussion with Bob before he came back to you.
I would imagine so, because almost everything in relation to Bob's songs and catalogue have to go past Bob himself. So he's probably seen it. They have a copy of the song. After I finished recording it, I sent them a copy with a further thank you note. As you can well imagine, the officers of his publishers in Sydney were very surprised and said, please send us Jeff Rosen's email. So they have a copy of it, and I'm certainly keeping his note to me on file.
Yes, and if ever Bob decides to reform Travelling Wilburys, I'm sure you'll be top of the list.
That would be a lovely invitation.
Yeah, Mikey Wilbury.
Well, yeah, I'll happily accept that.
So tell me about this song then. I mean, America is, we're in historic times, aren't we? America is at that fork in the road where if it goes in one direction, the world goes with it in that direction, or we go in another one and the world is saved. Was this the motivation for starting the song?
Not necessarily, because I've been a long-time history student of American politics, culture, and its creative environment. And of course, American music influenced my own writing dramatically when I first started out. And I think, as a lot of historians have said, if you look back over America's political history in the course of the last 25 or 30 years or more, there is a sense that this period we are now in is simply no more than an extension of what has been slowly occurring across those years in America. And I've been more and more disturbed by what I've been seeing in the last 8 to 10 years in America. It's never seemed to have effectively resolved its racial issues. The divide between the haves and the have-nots in America is now astronomical. I was there in Nashville about 2 or 3 months before Trump was elected, and talked to one of the waiters in the restaurant where we were eating. He was being paid $4.30 an hour, and the only way he made a decent wage was through tips. And everybody was struggling as a waiter in that location to get a shift on the nights when they were really busy, because that's when they made a decent amount of dough. Other than that, he didn't make any money. And he was working 3 different locations to try and make a living wage. And I thought, that's really difficult, really difficult. And those people who were working at that level clearly are struggling to just put food on the table. And, I think too, the other thing about it is that so many people have said, oh, it's all about Trump. Trump's actually no more than a symptom of what America has now been struggling with for a long time. He's not the cause. He would not have been elected had the sort of political divide that is now very evident become so top of mind in American politics. He appealed to the basest of basic instincts within the American society, who felt they've been left behind. And indeed they have. The irony, of course, is, he's an extremely wealthy man, although he owes a lot of money. And he's got nothing to do with those people that he's been trying to appeal to. So in that sense, my song was really about, in some ways, remarking on the things that had influenced me and the creative life of America that has been so powerful and so influential. And the distress that I feel that so much of that has happened within America is now being ignored for the worst of all possible political struggles. And it's a terrible situation for the country to be in. And we're seeing rioting that almost reflects back on what happened in Watts in Los Angeles all those years ago during the extreme racial issues that America was struggling with then.
Mm. So the decline of America, if we say, as you point out, it did not start with Trump. Do you go back to Bush 2, to Bush 1? Do you go back to Reagan? Do you go back to Nixon, Vietnam War, JFK, or do you go all the way back to World War II? Where did it start?
I think you go back to the late 60s, when the racial divide became very much top of mind. I think one of the tragedies of American politics is that as the divide has become more evident, the Republican Party has become further and further to the right. And it's really interesting that one of the organizations that's been set up to try and get rid of Trump had been set up by 4 of the most senior, most respected Republican political advisors. They set up a group called the Lincoln Project. And the Lincoln Project is being driven by 4 men who had formerly run campaigns for the Republican candidates at both the Senate and the House level. And, they were so disturbed by what was happening within the Republican Party that they decided they had to do something about trying to fight Trump. And whilst that's happened within the Republicans, it's also to some extent, I think, pushed the Democrats further to the left as well. But the irony of all that is, of course, that the Democratic platform is basically the same as the Labor Party platform in Australia. There's not a lot of difference. And yet Trump and everybody else on the right is running around calling them communists and socialists. It's nonsense, absolute nonsense. But hey, that's where it is, unfortunately.
Well, I guess Australia mirrors America in that the Conservatives here, the Liberal Party, have gone to the extreme right, and you've also got a similar situation in the UK, with Boris Johnson and the Tories?
I think all basic democracies are under serious threat because of that uh, same very evident movement that's going on, as you say, within other countries where democracy is the fundamental political environment. But I think the good thing about Australia, though, is that that far right uh, extension of the Liberal Party is a relatively small minority. But unfortunately, it has huge influence. And that influence, to a large extent, of course, is also being driven by the Murdoch press. They've got about 70% of the ownership of the print media in Australia, and via their Fox channel. And that other thing, of course, that's so evident is, and I look at a lot of American media, the Fox channel in America is almost like they live in a completely different universe to the rest of America. It's quite bizarre. It really is bizarre. And to some extent, that's what's happening with Fox in Australia as well. The opinion leaders on Fox are moving further and further to the extreme right. And I can well understand why James Murdoch, for instance, has resigned from the the Murdoch board, because he's so distressed by basically what is false information being put out there, and essentially lies about what's going on in the world, its environment, in relation to climate change, and in relation to the political environment. Um, so all of that is sort of, in a way, squeezed into my song, and an attempt to find some way to say, hey, I love America, and I'm really distressed at what you're going through. Please find a way to fix it.
Well, we live in historic times, Mike. You've articulated it in Letter to America. Thanks for the chat.
Mate, thank you very much. Nice to see you, Paul.